Hi, everyone, whoever has joined. We're just going to wait a couple minutes for Fally to come on. I always say, rather come on a few minutes early to make sure that we are set up properly because, technology. Feel free to show your faces, to say hi. When we start, I'll ask everyone just to mute. Who do we have? Rachel and Shauna. Thank you for joining today. If we have time, we are going to open the floor for questions, which I always find is super juicy and super exciting, and you really get awesome advice. But we'll see how it goes. As soon as Folly gets on, we have a couple of pointers that we want to cover. Just going to ask if everyone can mute themselves unless they are here to say hi. So I see that we have someone, Rachel is on. If you can please mute yourself. I wonder if there's a way that I can mute you. Yes, I actually can. Okay, so if you hear this and you don't know how to mute, I'm going to mute you from my end. Okay. Hey, Folly.
Hey.
How are you?
First time using Microsoft Teams and not sure how I feel about it.
You know what? I'm not sure either, but it's just how the tech I set up my computer, so it's connected to Outlook and all my emails. He is very into everything has to be secure, so he doesn't trust Google and their platform. So it's been a challenge, but
Wait, there's someone out there that doesn't trust Google? Is that a thing?
it's apparently a thing with these IT guys. I don't know, but on the bright side is that no one will get spammed. So from my account, even though I accidentally CC'd instead of BCC'd, but you won't get spammed. So there's always that.
I'm like, why is my camera crooked? This is not how Zoom cameras work. But I think we're just going to leave it at this and just assume we're fine, right?
Yeah, we're fine. I mean, you could take a few minutes. I just actually had to go in and mute someone from my end. You see, I'm also figuring this out. I don't know how to mute everyone except you.
So everyone, I guess, is going to have to mute themselves.
Right, but someone didn't, and I guess she wasn't hearing. So I just muted her on my end, and we're good. I started telling everyone that if we have time and we're open to it, we're going to feel into it. We might open the floor for some questions. We'll see how it goes. But we want to cover some important topics today. So thank you for coming on and being here with us. I always just trust in where the divine is guiding me. And I feel like whenever I do these lives or connections, they're always so good because they're just happen organic and naturally, and they're just meant to be. So we're going to get a lot of juicy stuff today. So first of all, welcome everyone to today's live discussion. I'm Tapo Ruth, a women's empowerment coach. I am dedicated to helping women live confidently and empowered. Today, we're speaking about safety versus certificates, which I think is a super important topic. And we will guide you in making smart choices in your healing journey. So as someone who's, been witnessing women on their healing and empowerment journeys, I find that true transformation comes beyond the qualifications. It's not the fancy certificates. It's not necessarily a bunch of numbers or letters after someone's name. It's really about you feeling safe and confident and making the choices for yourself. So I'm excited to have with me today Fally Klein, the amazing Fally Klein, a teacher, a breathwork facilitator, a well-known lecturer, creator of workshops. She also teaches self-intimacy and self-development, and I'm sure a lot more things.
Self-intimacy sounds really strange now that I hear you say that out loud.
I'm okay, intimacy and self-development.
Self-development.
I'm
self-intimacy.
Okay.
That's definitely something to look into.
That could be a thing. That could be
it is a thing. I think it's for another time. Another platform.
Maybe not for right now, yeah. You just have so many things going on. I'm like, okay, let me see if I can get it right. But yeah, you'll take over and share your things. But Fally brings incredible insight to this topic with her experience and certifications and facilitations. And together we are going to explore how to make you feel empowered in your decisions on your healing journey. So again, our goal for today is to help you learn to trust yourself when choosing practitioners instead of solely relying on certificates and qualifications. So our goal is that by the end of this conversation, we want you to feel more confident, empowered, and safe in your healing journey. So Fally, I'm going to shift this over to you. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, how you got here, and if you would like to share like your experiences with feeling safe in a healing environment.
Sounds good. I mean, yeah, there are so many different places we can go with this.
Yes.
I think my perspective is I think what I want everybody to know is I don't have a single diploma hanging on my wall. I think that's really important for people to know.
Mm,
I never graduated college, never wanted to. I mean, I had my moments where I did. I do have my bachelor's. Um, I had this process of being and out of college for years because every time there were a lot of shoulds around
mm.
college education. And someone recently told me a great line: should is just could with shame.
Ooh.
And I think looking back at my education, my years looking to achieve an education, I realized that a lot of my decisions around education, especially when coming to college, is that college didn't speak to me. The college education, what they were teaching me there, it wasn't calling me, but I kept going back because I thought I needed to. There was a certain
Hmm.
amount of shame around the letters that I thought I needed to have after my name in order to justify the work that I was doing or wanted to be doing in the world. And so, but every time that I would go to college and I would immerse myself in the learning, something in me just didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I was learning the things I wanted to learn or that I needed to learn or that was going to be beneficial, again, for the people that I was going to be working with or the work
Right.
that I was already doing. And so it really led me on this search of what am I doing? And if I do want to learn, who do I want to be learning from? What is it
Yes.
that I want to be learning? And so I started looking into how our education system developed. And I realized it took me a long time to realize this, and it took me an even longer time to be able to articulate this, is that if you go back to ancient times, right, there's a difference between education and mastery. And education was only limited to things that a person needed to survive in this world. So the things that you could be educated on, that you could go to school for, was learning how to read,
Mm,
learning math, learning basic skill sets that you were then going to go out into the world and utilize to make your life better. But then there was a whole different form of learning, right? And it doesn't matter whether it was the learning of religion, was it whether it was the learning of, let's call it philosophy, right? Different kind of more not brain based but thought based learning.
yeah.
Okay, not fact based learning but thought based learning. And that kind of learning was not available to the masses. That kind of learning, you couldn't just show up for a couple of years of school, pass a few tests, and then be ordained as some sort of person who had graduated a program. In order to achieve that level of learning, you had to be accepted. You had to find a teacher that had certain qualities that you wanted to learn from them. You had to find a teacher that would be willing and available to teach that to you. And then you had to apprentice yourself to that teacher, not for the sake of the information, but for the sake of everything that came with that information. And
Mm,
that is, in our terms, in the Jewish world, we would call that smicha.
mm,
And even today, a smicha program has become devalued. Today, you can join a smicha program. So, for those of you who are listening that are not Jewish or familiar with the word smicha, it means ordination, right? To become ordained as a rabbi, you would have to pass a certain threshold of information, knowledge, skill, and awareness. But today, that also has been downgraded to you can sign up for a program. Everybody gets accepted to this program if you sign up, if you pay the money, and then you graduate by taking a certain amount of tests. That's a fairly recent development. It wasn't that long ago, we're not even talking 100 years ago, that in order to be ordained, in order to achieve smicha, you first had to be accepted into a program on merit. You had to find a teacher who would be willing to do that for you, and he would take you under his wing, and there would be no guarantee that, oh, you finished this course. This is a 2-year course of study. Some people completed it in 2 years. Some people it took 20 years. And it wasn't like, again, we've modeled ourselves after the grade school system. First grade, second grade, third grade. There was no grade school when it came to that level of education. You surrendered yourself to a process for the
mm,
sake of being transformed by that process under the guidance of someone that you really looked up to as a role model. And they took you under their wing until they really felt that you have stepped into that place. That is completely missing from our world on every level. So it's missing from the academic level. And yes, I do feel that today, academia still holds a higher standard, right? People who are going to college are going to probably have to work a lot harder than
Yes.
people who are taking a weekend training course, right? That gives you a certificate after 3 days. There's no question that there are differences across the board. But this particular piece of smicha, of a real role model who is willing to take you on under their wing for an extended period of time, for an extended, not just to teach you information, but to oversee your transformation so that they can mentor you into becoming this kind of person that you set out to become, that is completely devoid in today's world. And I think it's having a massive effect in terms of what we're seeing today with client safety and the integrity of the work that's getting
Hmm.
done.
Yes, wow, that is so true. I was just thinking when you said it could be like whether it's philosophy or religion, like the prophets, like back in the day, like right, they went to like prophet schools and they could start much younger, but they had to like be accepted, and it was like a whole training system. And like literally, I like wow, it makes so much sense what you're saying. And something that came to me while you're talking is that when I would go to or even be in a training with other healers or energy workers or healing workers, so to say, I was under the misconception that anyone who does this kind of work would be an empath. And I had an extremely rude awakening a couple of times till I finally realized, no, this is not how it works. Spending time, money, and energy. It's like you're saying, because this particular person said, "Ooh, this sounds interesting to me for whatever reason," or let's say they had a transformative life, alteration through their own healing work, and then they decide, "Oh, let me just learn this method or this system, and then like I can do it and I can teach it to other people," but they're missing the whole. It's not like embedded in them. It's not embodied. It's not in their guts and their bones and their blood. It's just like it's kind of like when you take a test in school, right? So you memorize it and then you just repeat it and then you get graded. But there's that missing piece, that like empathy, that kindness, that safety. Like not everyone is qualified to do this kind of work, and just because someone could also doesn't maybe mean that they
They
should.
should.
Yeah, so let's switch that around too. So yeah, that's so important. It starts with the education system, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's anything particularly wrong with the way we're educating today. I think there's just a distinction that has to be made that not all education is created equal. There are
Hmm.
certain things that you can learn in school, and there are certain things that you absolutely cannot, that you really do need a dedicated mentor who is going
Yes.
to take you under their wing as an apprentice and take that level of responsibility for you. And the thing is also that schools have become mass marketed, right? So when you joined a training or when I joined a training, especially if it's an online training, there can be 200 people in the cohort, right? Versus if you think about trying to take on an apprentice, how many apprentices can you realistically take on at one time, right? If I'm
Yeah.
dedicating myself to your growth, I can only take on a handful of people at a time or even over an extended period of time. And if I can only take on a handful of people at a time, that you can imagine that your education then becomes much more expensive but also much more precious. So
Sure.
today, education has become very cheap, very
Yeah.
accessible, but it's also diminished a lot of the quality. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think it's fantastic. You can see from all the books behind me,
Yes.
I think it's fantastic that we live in an age of information, but
Yes.
the amount of information that you have doesn't necessarily translate into making you an amazing, safe practitioner.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think we're not talking enough about, or we're not. Um, I'm finding very few people who even appreciate. Some people are like, okay, well, I just want their certificate on my wall. What is it going to? You know how many people reach out to me because I teach
Hmm.
them trainings. I teach a hypnotherapy training and I teach a breathwork facilitator training. The amount of people who will reach out to me asking about my trainings, and then they find out there are prerequisites to joining my trainings. The trainings cost a lot of money. and they take
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time. And their
Mm-hmm.
interest starts dwindling. They hear, okay, first you have to take the no. And then they're like, and then it filters out a lot of people.
But
And
that's
then
what
the
you
amount of
want.
people,
You
of
want the
course
people
it's
who
what I
are
want.
like all in. Yeah.
But what's shocking to me is that they hear my standards and then they'll turn around and go take a 3-day training somewhere else. When I'm telling you that my training takes a year and someone else's training takes 3 days, and they'll take the 3-day training, they'll put their certificate on their wall, and they know. They know that there's a disparity there, but so many people don't care. They're just,
Right.
I just want that certificate. I want the letters after my name. And
Yeah.
that's something that I have a very hard time with. I mean, I think when we spoke over WhatsApp, we were talking about setting this up. One of the things that I mentioned to you is I get these calls all the time, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why is your training so long and so expensive when someone else's is so short and so cheap? Or why would I go to this practitioner versus that practitioner? And the answer that I had shared with you and that I give to a lot of people is like any kid in third grade who's learning basic science knows how to put together a circuit, right? They attach a few wires and they make the light bulb go on.
Mm-hmm.
Circuitry is one of the simplest things to teach a kid. But when you have a circuit, a fuse blown in your house, you're not calling your third grader to fix
Mm-hmm.
that. You're calling an electrician, preferably a
Mm-hmm.
licensed electrician who has spent a lot of time in school getting their licensure. By the way, I live in New York. Getting your licensure in New York as an electrician, it's hard work, but
Yeah.
every third grader can do it. And I
Yeah.
feel like when it comes to this work, when it comes to the circuitry of the mind, because we are complicated beings, we have neural circuits in our actual brains. And it's like, who are you allowing to operate on the circuits of your brain? Someone who did a third grade level of circuitry education, or someone who took their education and your process and your brain so seriously that they were willing to go all the way. And it's almost like I see facilitators don't care and clients don't know to care.
Right.
And I
The
think that's why we're having
awareness.
this conversation.
Yes. Well, would you say that there are some important things to consider when choosing a healer or healing worker or a practitioner other than their certificates?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to talk about certificates because I'm a lover of knowledge. I've taken many courses, many trainings. Like I said, I went in and out of college a bunch of times till I realized I was never going to find what I was looking for there. That, by the way, love people who go to college. It just never worked for me. You
Yes.
know,
Let's make
I
that
I
clear.
I actually work with a licensed therapist. I see a licensed therapist. I believe in that. It just was very clear that it wasn't my path. And I think that's really important. When you work for when you try to work with a facilitator and you look for someone to work with, are they doing what they thought they should, or are they living their life path? I think that's something that's so vital. And you can tell, you can really tell when someone is embodied, when they are bringing their, like you mentioned before, their life experience, their wisdom, all of who they are, not all of what they were taught,
Right.
but all of what life has brought to them is coming through them. There's a sense that you have with that. But I don't like talking about the sense thing because a
I
lot of
know.
clients
Some
don't
people don't
know,
get it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They just don't get
Yeah.
it. Like, okay, just tell me give me something physical to look for.
Yeah.
So I will tell you a couple of things straight off the bat. First off, you want to look for someone that is an actual role model for you that
Mm-hmm.
reflects the values that you believe in.
Yeah.
Anybody who isn't living a life that you can actually look up to, that you can actually find meaningful, how can they have that kind of, how can you trust them to have that kind of impact on your life? So I've mentioned this story before in other talks that I've given, but many years ago I was seeing a therapist and she wasn't religious. And I don't care. She was good at what she does. But there was a moment in our time together where she completely dismissed my religious lifestyle and me choosing to live in a religious community. She told me that my issue was that I was living in a community that was making me miserable. I do live in an Orthodox community. Orthodox communities are pretty stringent. There are rules. If you're choosing to live in this society, you got to adapt to the framework of the society. Whether
Yes.
you like it or not, it's a choice. If you want to take advantage of the yeshiva systems, the kosher food, the easy access, you also have to conform to what the society demands of you. And I was
Yes.
really struggling with that. And she went and told me, well, what's really making you miserable is living in this society. You need to move out. And I remember this light bulb going off in my brain thinking, you and I are not a match.
Mm.
You cannot understand the value of an Orthodox Jewish family living in an Orthodox Jewish community. And if you can't understand that that's going to be a value for me and a priority for me, then you and I are not going to be a match as therapist and client because you're going to keep throwing suggestions at me that are never going to resonate with where I'm
Right.
at. And when I don't agree to what you're sharing, you're just going to assume that I'm the problem. And if we're not looking at the world through the same lens, right, through the same lens of values, I mean, I don't expect a
Right.
therapist and I to have the same lens on everything. There's a reason why I'm going to them, right? But in terms of values, I also, when I chose people that I wanted to be working with, it was really important for me that they were married and in a healthy and stable marriage. Because
Mm-hmm.
for me, my marriage and my relationship is a value to me. So when I'm working with someone, and especially if I'm struggling in my marriage and in my relationships, I want someone that I can look up to as a role model in that. For
Yes.
me, working with someone who's a parent, super important. I'm a parent. So many of my issues revolve around parenting. These are things. Now, does every facilitator that I work with have to match every single one of my things? No, but it gives you a general idea of what it is that I'm going to be looking for, right?
Mhm.
You're not going to catch me working with someone, who's 25 and unmarried and not a parent. As much as she might be super smart and very skilled at what they do, there's just something in me that deep inside is going to let me know that we're not on the same page. And I may
Yeah.
send clients your way because I may think that you are very skilled and you have what to offer, but you may not exactly have what to offer me. And that's something that's my discernment over what I need. And I think that's something super important for clients to look at. Another thing to be really aware of, work with someone who isn't afraid of your questions,
Yes.
doesn't get defensive when you ask
Yes.
questions
That's
about
a
who
big
did you
red
train
flag, right?
with?
Yeah.
Yes, who did you train with? What are your continuing hours of education? Who's your supervisor? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
supervision?
Hmm.
Right? And you know what? I fully respect when facilitators don't want to give out personal information. That's okay, but they should be comfortable with your questions.
Right.
They should be comfortable talking to you about those things. Anytime you see a facilitator getting defensive, there's something they're
Mm-hmm.
not sharing with you, there's some insecurity there. We're all human. I have my insecurities, but my insecurities should never come into the room with clients. If a client is asking me something and my insecurities come into the room, we're not a fit,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, what else? I don't know. Maybe you have some thoughts around this. My
I was
brain is like swimming. There's so much there, but
I know. We'll try to niche it so people can leave with like practical
mhm.
like tools that they can apply. So I love the first step is like values. You need to sit down and write it down or discuss it with someone like what are your values? What is important to you? And then find someone that mirrors that or even like reflects like or like who you'd want to be in a few years, right? Like if you're
But I
struggling
think that's
in
the first piece. And I'm hearing as you're talking, I'm reflecting on the thing that I didn't say.
okay,
You as the client need to know your values first.
right.
Don't challenge your facilitator on their values until you've taken an honest look at what yours are.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Step one should be like you sit down and write down and figure out what your values are. And then find someone that aligns with that, or even like what you're striving to be. If you are struggling with your, in your relationship with your husband or marriage, right? You're gonna look for someone, like you said, who has that solid foundational relationship that's healthy. Again, like there might be some personal questions involved, and then the facilitator or therapist can politely decline. And again, you'll feel if it's coming from a healthy place or a defensive place, right? But you can kind of like once you understand what your values are, right? Again, we're speaking just practical tools. Figure out your values, like what is important to you, right? Religion, like for me, again, I don't either care if that person's Jewish or religious or not, but they need to respect that I am. And if they don't, then it's a hard no for me. So it's figuring out what your values are. That will be like one. And two, don't be afraid to ask questions, right? I always say it's for everything. Like if someone gets defensive, it's like, ooh, like what's going on there? Like you could again respectfully decline, be like, oh, that's a personal question. I don't feel like answering that right now. But if someone gets defensive, it's like, ooh. So that would be like two practical tools. Figure out your values, find someone that's aligned with that, and ask questions to make sure that that person is aligned with your values.
So another thing that I looked for personally, when I was looking for a therapist a few years ago, I had a thing in my head. I said they needed to be of my community, but not in my community, because I
Okay.
wanted them to understand where I come from, right? Those
Yeah.
values, but I didn't
Mhm.
want them to be close enough that we would have anybody or anything in common,
Right.
right? I didn't want a therapist who was ever going to try to become my friend. That was
Oh,
really
oh,
important for
yeah.
me.
Well,
I
that's
see
not
that,
healthy. Mm-hmm.
one of my
Mm-hmm.
students who's in my facilitator training asked me, "What do you do?" So the facilitator training, we're talking about breathwork facilitators. We're not talking about actual therapists with their codes of ethics.
Yeah.
So this student of mine asked, "What if you have a client that becomes a friend? Is that a thing? Can it happen?" And I answered, "A client can become your friend, but then they have to stop being your client.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's no
You
such
can't
thing,
handle it
right?
all.
That you
Uh-uh.
you can't have it both ways." And just so that you know, I've always found that when a client becomes your friend, doesn't matter how long you're going to be friends, how long that friendship goes. There's always a little bit of like that power dynamic where you met in a
Yes.
little bit of an uneven way. It
Yes.
never really changes, and that's something to be aware of. A client can't ever really be that friend.
Yeah. I have an equal friend. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always going to be that no, and I think it could work. Like I have many clients, I wouldn't call them clients, but people that I've met on workshops that are today in that place of friendship, but it
Mm-hmm.
only works because we acknowledge our origins and how it always started with a little bit of
Yeah.
unevenness, and that's
Right.
okay, but we acknowledge it. We don't pretend that it doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
So again, somebody who was in my community, not of my community, someone that wasn't going to be my friend. I wanted someone much, much older. It was
Okay.
really important for me because again, I liked, and I, because of the image that I had is I want to sit down and talk to someone who could potentially be a future version of myself.
Oh, right.
So
Like
that
what
was,
I'm
I
saying
want to see
before, right?
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to see myself in 30 years. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted the work person that I was going to work with to be very snarky. That was important to me, and to have like a little bit of a lightness of being and not take the world too seriously. Because I felt like that was important for me. The words
Okay.
healing journey have this intense weight, and
Yes.
everybody's been taking themselves so seriously.
Seriously. Yeah.
And I'm like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to work with a facilitator who can also help me diminish my ego a little bit, help me
Mm-hmm.
laugh at myself. So that lightness of being. And I started calling therapy my coffee dates with myself
Hmm.
because that's
Okay.
what I feel like my sessions are. They're an opportunity for me to sit with myself, get
Really
to know
reflect
myself
back.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, have someone who reflects me to me. This is not about me working with a therapist. A great therapist is you working with yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
them holding space for you to
Yes.
work with yourself. It's not a relationship between the therapist and the client. A really good therapist helps the client have a relationship with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's super important. And I think for me, a lot of this work comes down to, again, everybody's on this healing journey, right? So, what are your goals for when you enter into a therapeutic relationship? What is it that you're really looking for? And a lot of people are thinking, I want to feel better. I want to be out of pain. I want to save my marriage, right? Etc. And my therapist actually gave me a great line that I'm going to put out here because it's so good that
Please
I
do.
have to just give it over. She told me at one point, she says, "You're viewing your life like a game of rush hour. I'm the red car and I
Mm,
got to get out.
mm.
Get me out of this jam."
Wow.
And she says, the thing with rush hour is that there's always going to be another level and it's
Oh,
always going to
oh,
get harder. She
yes.
says, if you see yourself as the red car and you're coming to therapy so that therapy and facilitation gets you out of the jam, you'll just keep coming back because there's always going to be another jam. She says,
Mm,
don't look at the work that you're doing that way. The work that you're doing is building a puzzle. You're collecting pieces. Every session, every facilitator that you meet, every life experience is giving you a piece of the puzzle. And the way we build a puzzle is that it takes a long time. And first you get the corners and then you
yeah.
get the frame.
Outline.
And
Mm-hmm.
finally you think you have the frame and it's supposed to get easier, but it doesn't.
Supposed to.
Right? Because the inside takes a lot of time. And then sometimes you collect a bunch of pieces from this side of the board and then a bunch of pieces from that side of the board. And slowly, slowly, they all come together. And that's what this work has to be about. It's not about getting you out of pain, it's not about
Mm,
getting you through crisis. It's about helping you pick up the pieces of you. Of your the puzzle that you're building is not the puzzle of your marriage. It's not the puzzle of your trauma. It's the puzzle of who you are as a complete being. And the more puzzle pieces you reclaim and fit into place inside, the more clarity you have on who you are And the more clarity you have on who you are inside brings you more clarity outside. So that's what you're looking for when you're looking for a facilitator. You're not
Mhm.
playing rush hour. This is not crisis management. This is, I'm working with someone who can help give me back the pieces to myself that I have always had, but maybe never had access to.
Mm-hmm. And in a way
That's
with
my framework.
kindness and compassion, I feel like your therapist shouldn't feel like you're going to the principal's office, right? Like,
Right.
they're not there to make you feel that way. You should be looking forward to go to your therapist's office because they, or whatever it is, because they provide a safe space for you to be you, without judgment, unapologetically, just that you can be, that you can breathe. So if you're feeling like fear of going or like strong resistance, then there's something to rethink about this relationship with your therapist. Because also, like you were saying before, the coffee date with yourself, I love that. Like I'm just envisioning like cozy, like Ugg slippers, right? You with your hoodie and like exactly
I
this. It's
show up
like
as I am.
chilling, yeah. Chilling and doing your thing and like, it's such a yummy good feeling. Like that should be the feeling. It's hard again to explain like sensing and feeling, but you know when you feel good and excited to go somewhere, as opposed to like, oh, I don't want to. It's like, when you hate your job and you don't want to get out of bed because you have to go to work. Like it should not feel like that. Another thing that I'm curious to see if you want to speak about this is also, I find that whether it's a healer or a therapist, everyone comes at a different time of your life and is supposed to take you to a different place. If you're with the same healer or therapist for like 3 years, for me, I find that's a little bit of a red flag. So, is that something that you want to get into? Do you agree? Like, what's your opinion on that?
So before I go there was something else I wanted to say that I don't want to lose my train of
This
thought
is
here. So
why
I'm just
this
going to
conversation can
backtrack.
take all day, but yeah.
Yes. Your therapist, facilitator, healer, practitioner should never gossip with you about anyone that isn't you.
Oh,
So you can be coming to the practitioner and talking about the fight that you had with your husband that morning.
okay.
That's okay if you need to be processing that. But I have found so many therapists
Mm.
who just gossip,
Ooh.
and they gossip with their clients about other people in the client's life. Therapy is not, it should never feel like a gossip magazine. You know,
Mhm.
um, therapists get a lot of privileged information because
Yeah.
clients share a lot. But the role of a therapist is to be able to hold that privileged information and bring it back to the client. You know, one of
Hmm.
the one of the things we say all the time is you can talk to me about your husband, but your husband isn't in the room. You are. So how can I support you? This isn't about your child. This isn't about your husband. This is about you. And every single session should only and always be about you. You're going to come to the session talking about the million different things that are going on in your life, but a really good facilitator will always make it about you. They will never take sides in your life. Any
Hmm.
facilitator, by the way, who throws out some sort of pathology, the amount of people I see who are absolutely convinced that their spouse has a diagnosis like BPD
Oh,
or narcissism
oh
because
yeah,
their
narcissism. That's a
therapist
big
said
one.
so.
Yeah.
Everyone's a
Hmm.
narcissist
Yeah.
or borderline personality because their therapist said so, and their therapist said so without ever meeting the spouse, right?
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's it's mind-boggling. A good therapist will never talk about your spouse or anyone or your parents or your children.
they're
They will
there for
talk about
you.
you
Yes.
always. So they're never going to gossip, and they're not going to let you gossip. They're going to always take what you're telling them and turn it into how can I support you. A good therapist will never make you doubt yourself. She will help you feel empowered. Again, you're
Yeah.
you're you're reclaiming your tools, you're reclaiming your pieces. You should be walking out of these sessions feeling like I got to know myself a little better. And I
Yeah.
actually think I'm a cool person. I like the person that I'm finding out I am inside. That, and I can't guarantee that you're going to feel that after every session, but as a whole, if you're working with someone, you should be walking away feeling that way. And on top of that, and then we'll go to your question about timing,
Sure.
a good therapist, a good facilitator shouldn't be afraid to tell it to you like it is. Shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be afraid to call you out. I find way too
Again, in
many
the right
people are
way,
in,
but yes.
yeah, way too many people are like, well, I don't have to be a parent right now because my therapist says that I have. some me time or whatever it
Yes, yeah.
is,
I'm
or
reparenting myself so I can throw all my other responsibilities out because I'm reparenting my 5-year-old me.
right. So my actual 5-year-old needs to wait while I
Right.
reparent
Yeah.
my 5-year-old me, and
Yeah.
my marriage needs to wait because I'm actually only 5 inside,
Right.
right? All of those
Oh.
things. That is toxic therapy right there. You know what else is toxic? The word toxic. So when people come out of therapy saying, I can't with my mother because she's toxic,
Ooh.
that toxicity lives inside of you.
Mm.
She may be a difficult person, but again, good therapy will never call your mother a toxic person. Good therapy will say, how can I support you
Yes.
in the difficult relationship you have with your mom? It's never going to say your mom is a toxic person, cut her out of your life. A good
Hmm.
therapist and good therapy is going to say, how can we build you so that you can better deal with the things that are already happening, not cut off all of those things that are happening. Set better boundaries inside, not necessarily outside, because they all
Yeah.
start inside. So those are hallmarks, and it may take you time to really see that. Sometimes you're going to work with a therapist that you think you like, and they might be good for you, and that's kind of leading
Hmm.
into your question
Yeah.
up until a point.
Right.
And then something switches, and maybe it's not them that switches. Maybe it's you. Maybe
Hmm.
you've evolved. Maybe a new circumstance has brought you to a place where you see life differently, and you realize that the way that they're navigating this and supporting you is no longer what you need. Or sometimes you're with a therapist that came really highly recommended. You trust the person that sent you there, you trust the process, and then it's just not.
It's, yeah.
There are some red flags, and you're questioning yourself because you're thinking, this therapist came so highly recommended. I feel like I've done good work with this person. Why am I now doubting this? You are allowed to doubt. You should be able to bring those doubts to your therapist even after an extended period of time. And a good therapist will be happy to talk about those things with you. Like you
Yes.
said, maybe a good therapist will say and agree, you know what? You're right. I was out of line. Or they'll say and agree, you know what? I think you're right. I think you're ready for something other than me. I think
Yes.
you're
That's
ready
the
to
best.
move forward. That's the best answer that you could possibly get. When a
Yes.
therapist says, I think you're right, let's talk about termination. Let's talk about ending our time together. Where can you go from here? Right?
Hmm.
And breaking up with a therapist should never feel bad. It
The
should feel like
word sounds like
respect,
breaking up, right?
right?
Maybe it should be like
Right?
transitioning to another therapist or
I
yeah.
think a lot of people think it is a breakup. Like, how do I tell my therapist I don't want to see
Yeah.
them anymore?
Right.
A good
Yeah.
therapist is going to be excited for you when that
Hmm.
moment arrives.
Because again, they should be respecting whatever your decision is, you know? Even if they don't 100% agree, they can respect that this is what you're feeling right now and allow you to make the decision that you are feeling, you know? So that is the best when exactly when they're like, yes, you're ready to like move. Like if you feel like you're not getting anywhere or you're with the same therapist for 3 years, that therapist is basically just taking your money and sitting back and doing her thing because they're supposed to be working and giving you tools and skills to better yourself that you can integrate and implement in your life. I always say your therapist should be giving you homework. If you're not getting your homework, then there's something weird going on. Like you're just paying for an expensive friend, like to got like back to the gossip thing, or just like it's I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that do that. They take advantage. It's like, oh, easy money. They just like have the tissue box out and that person just sits and cries, which it feels good to have a good cry. But if you're doing the same thing over and over, like 2, 3 years in, it's like it's red flag.
So
You
there's a
should feel
distinction here.
empowered.
There's a
Okay, go
distinction
for it.
here. We have to go back to how education developed, okay? So initially, when this whole field of psychology was brought forth, we're talking that they were psychoanalysts, psychotherapists. Psychoanalysts and psychotherapists spend years and years in school. Then there's the opposite end where you have coaches,
Hmm.
right? Coaches spend maybe a year training. Some coaching programs train you in a couple of months, even a
Right.
couple of weeks, right? So we're talking about two
Or like
opposite ends of the
3 day
spectrum.
seminars.
Three
That's the
day
best.
weekend seminars. I'll print you
Right.
a certificate that looks super fancy.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's these two opposite ends of the spectrum. Now,
Okay.
in psychoanalysis or psychotherapy, you actually can expect to be there for a long time, right? In a psychoanalytic
Okay.
relationship, You might have a relationship with a psychoanalyst for 7 years, 10 years,
Really?
because there's always something to go deeper in because our psyches are fascinating, right?
Okay.
Coaching is very short term. Coaching is,
Mm,
think of a soccer coach. I am here to help you be a great soccer player so you can achieve the goal and win the
yeah.
game.
Right.
Coaching is short term. In the years, something else has manifested, something that is kind of in between. 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, a social worker was not a therapist. A social worker was a social worker. And
Mm,
in my days, when we were thinking about joining social work school, the joke was, or not even the joke, the thing was social work is paperwork, right? You're not really working with the field, you're filing paperwork.
yeah.
Something happened very recently that social workers became therapists. So there's like
Yeah.
this little bridge.
Okay.
There's this bridge where only 2 years of schooling are required to call yourself a therapist, but it is nothing at all like the psychoanalysts of Freud's days where
Mm-hmm.
people, yes, would spend a lot of years in therapy, plumbing their depths. And the people who would spend many, many years in psychoanalysis were people who were extremely serious. We're talking like the Musser movement, right? We're talking about people who really wanted, in Hebrew, we say da es atzmacha. It's a thing to really know yourself, to get to
Yeah.
know yourself. That's what psychoanalysis is for. And it
Okay.
wasn't about trauma and it wasn't about getting you past a
Mm,
pain point. It was something it included that, but it was much deeper than that, right? So now this in between thing happened where you have people that call themselves therapists, but they are nothing at all like what Freud actually intended when psychoanalysis was developed. And they are
mm,
more towards they're midway between therapists and coaches. So
yeah.
they help you with the talk therapy, but also there should be an active component. They should be getting you past a certain pain point, and you
Right.
shouldn't be in this middle road of therapy for too long,
Mm,
right? Now, you shouldn't be there for 5 minutes. I think you have to give it a dedicated amount of time. I love your 3 year thing. I think 3 years is a great example. Again, if you're in therapy for 3 years and it's moving and you can catalyze your growth and you can
yeah.
really see what's happening for you, that's fantastic. But if
Yeah.
therapy just became this thing that you do because you should, right? Could plus
Mm-hmm.
shame, where's your kick in the pants, so
Right.
to speak? Why hasn't your therapist broken up with you yet? They should be the one. A good therapist will say, also, you're the soccer coach that coached you when you were in fifth grade is probably not going to be the soccer coach that's going to get you into your Division 1 soccer team. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not going to work because college level soccer is not being coached by fifth grade coaches. So if you want to get somewhere in life, you need to be ready. Sorry, my phone just went off. You need to be ready to evolve past the people who got you to this point and move on to the people who can get you to the next point. And those people, if your fifth grade coach really wanted to see you shine, he would be thrilled to hand you over to your middle school, junior high
Right.
school, and college level coach.
Yeah. Otherwise, they're holding you back from your potential and from growing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for clarifying. I love that distinction. It's so true because again, if you're going for a psychotherapy or anything in that route, it would make sense. Again, it's not something that we're aware of, like most of us that we know do, because you're not going for problems, so to say. It's deeper than that. And coaches is short term. They're meant to get you to your goal and then you move on. So it's that middle ground, that middle place. It's again, give it enough time to feel into it and see if you're making progress. But if you're not making progress after a while, you should bring that up with your therapist. Again, see how they react. They should be happy for you and excited for you that you're ready to move forward. If not, that is a red flag. The therapist or coach or whoever it is should always be there to respect your choices and guide you as best as they can and help you. What I call is stay in your lane. Whenever I have a client that's going on about this person, that person, whatever, I'm like, okay, so stay in your lane. Like that's my thing. Like that's our keyword, stay in your lane. I want to help you like feel how you feel about this, not how this person, that, right? So it's like ultimately a coach's or facilitator's goal to help you feel into you so you can make empowered decisions and choices based off of your needs. And again, it's like reclaiming those pieces. You want to leave feeling like, oh, so now I know how I feel and like what I would like to do about that feeling. So, so important. The values, asking questions, making sure that the therapist is not there. Like it's not the coffee couch gossip kind of date. It's the date with myself coffee kind of date. Um, and it's so important. Again, we're not here to disc credentials at all. They're needed and they're important. It's like, how can we differentiate when someone is good, whether they have the certificates or not? And I think the questions also help with people building confidence and making their decisions about healing or being pressured about other people's opinions. Um, Again, I know we mentioned in the beginning about it's hard to talk about like senses and feelings, but how can someone start trusting their own choices in their healing journey, especially if they're feeling unsure? Can we give them any practical
Sure.
tools?
Yeah, obviously they all need to take my course because I'm the one that can fix
Duh,
everyone. Yeah, obviously.
of
I do
course.
want to speak to this. There's there's a difference between your comfort zone, right? Stepping out of your comfort zone and
Hmm.
feeling uncomfortable, right? There's discomfort and feeling uncomfortable. And I know that they sound like the same thing, right? But good therapy will push you to your limits. It's gonna make you think about things that you didn't want to think about before. You might
Yeah,
feel a little bit uncentered. Even as you're gaining confidence, you're building new ground, but your old ground might become a little shaky, and that's
yeah.
okay. But then there are things that make you really uncomfortable, boundaries that get crossed, things that should never be said, red flags. And I think that a
Okay.
lot of clients don't know the difference.
Right.
They're so trusting of their therapist or of the process. They're so convinced that they don't know anything. I sometimes hear really difficult stories about
Yeah.
therapists who completely abuse their power, their position, their privilege. Um, and clients know that they didn't feel good about it, but they are not really sure if they should speak up, if they should say anything. And I think also being able as a person to honor your own, when your red flags kind of come up, when you're feeling uncomfortable, to be able to discern. I really like being pushed to my limits. I'm a junkie. I work out. I'm athletic. I can go harder and faster and longer than anybody else can. But then sometimes you have to question yourself, like the day that you are actually sick, and you have to ask, like, is this actually a good
Hmm.
idea for me? Like, I'm actually sick. Should I be getting out of bed and going to the gym today? Like, I know the gym is good. I know you're supposed to feel Charlie horse after the gym. I know it's okay to hurt a little bit after the gym. But should I be going to the gym when I'm sick? Is that the
Yeah.
level of pushing myself that I should be? And I think everybody can resonate with this. When you're talking about sensing, people have a hard time understanding what we're talking about. Like, how do you
Right.
sense? I think
Yeah.
this analogy really works. You know the difference between being Charlie horse and pushing yourself and
Hmm.
being sick and pushing yourself. And sometimes you walk into a facilitator and it's not a Charlie horse feeling, it's a sick feeling.
Mm.
Something happens in a session that doesn't feel right. Sometimes things happen that don't feel good. That's okay. But when
Hmm.
something doesn't feel right, that's not okay.
Like a
And it's
violation.
always
Yeah.
like a violation. And
Yeah.
you're not always going to have the words for it. You don't always have to be able to explain it, but you have to be able to honor it. And if you need someone to talk to about it, talk to someone about it. Get some outside support. Talk to a good friend, right? Find someone that you could talk to that will help you figure out. How many times I hear stories of people who stayed with facilitators or doctors or therapists that were really not okay. And that later on, other people started sharing stories of like, oh, yeah, this happened to me too. You too, you too. Oh, this wasn't okay. This was never okay. You mean I should have spoken up earlier? But people don't know that they can. If
Yeah.
something isn't feeling right, it probably, I don't want to make a judgment call and say, well, if it's not right, if it doesn't feel right, it isn't right. If it doesn't feel right, it's definitely not right for you. We
Hmm.
don't have to say that the therapist or the facilitator is a bad person, but if something doesn't feel right, it's perfectly okay to discern this person or this situation is not right for me and get yourself out. You also mentioned the staying in your lane.
Hmm.
I think it's important for therapists to also stay in their lane, not just a therapist to remind the client to stay in their lane. The amount of people that will come to me and they're on medication, and I'll say, well, who gave you the medication? Well, my nurse practitioner. I'm like, I'm sorry, why are you taking Lamictal, which is for bipolar disorder, serious mood disorders, when you're not seeing a therapist regularly, you're not seeing a psychiatrist, your OBGYN gave that to you that this is concerning people, and
Hmm.
this is an extreme example, right, of people prescribing medications that aren't theirs to prescribe. But I also see people mixing and matching modalities that they don't have a lot of training in, right? The amount of times that I get calls from people who did breath work with a client or with a friend and aren't trained, and then they're left with something that came up and they don't know how to deal with it,
Yeah.
and then they're calling me to help them get out of a jam. And it's like, why are you not staying in your lane as a facilitator? You want a
Hmm.
facilitator who knows their limits.
Their
You want a
place. Yeah.
facilitator who's comfortable saying, I can't help you here. This is as far as I go. I think what you're looking for might be someone else or someone who's certified in this. I can only take you this far. You know,
Yes. They can take their
that's
ego out of
important.
the equation and be like, again, they're here to serve the client to their best interest. So if they can take their ego out and say, like, oh, I understand you want to do this, but this is really not my thing. That is, again, that's a green flag for a good therapist. And in regards to the medication thing, unfortunately, it's so common. And I hear stories all the time for that as well. But that's a whole nother conversation for another time, but
Yeah.
it's important for everyone to stay in their lane. Again, the safety is so important. And you had said something before that I wanted to jump off of, but I don't remember.
You were asking how people can actually do the work of establishing that confidence inside of themselves. Is that what it
Right.
was?
Right. That's where we started going because I want people again. The sensing thing is hard to do, but speaking up and also what's the worst thing that will happen, right? If you're a client and you're feeling that there was a violation or you feel unsure, again, most of the time you won't be able to express what it was, right? Unless it was like an outright thing that was like really weird and off. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone or anything. You can just again like honor what you're feeling. Again, the more you take action and honor what you're feeling, the stronger your intuition will get. But you can also think, what's the worst that will happen? So this person will hate you. So you lost a couple $100. Okay. Would you rather keep on putting yourself purposely in the same situation where you feel uncomfortable and like weirded out? What's the worst that will happen? So I
I
think if
think,
people,
yeah,
no, I think if
let's
people think
go.
of that way, it might be helpful.
Yeah, I also feel like in the beginning, years and years ago, we're talking like 20 years ago, when I was working with a therapist, the one I told you about, who told me to leave my community, right? And I remember feeling like I didn't want to go back to them. And at the same time, I was consumed with this guilt and this shame because obviously the problem had to be me. They were
Mm,
the therapist. And if I felt like there was something wrong with what they were saying, and again, like I couldn't really articulate what it was that was bothering me,
right.
it took me years to realize that we didn't share the same values. But at the time, when I wasn't feeling comfortable with what they were telling me, I thought the issue had to be me. The only reason I broke up with that therapist at the time was because there was like there was a hurricane happening, like, and her
Mm,
her office was closed because it was like severely hit and we had to cancel sessions, and all of a sudden it was like that's my out. I wasn't even brave enough to stop seeing this therapist. I was so glad when it was Hurricane
the
Sandy, so it
hurricane.
wasn't 20
Yeah.
years ago, it was 15 years ago or something like that. When no, it was 13 years ago. Sorry, 13 years ago. I remember which kid was a baby
Okay.
then. So it was 12 years ago. Yeah, 12 years ago. When Hurricane Sandy hit 12 years ago, I wasn't even confident enough at that time in my life to speak up to a therapist. And look at me today. That was only 12 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. I needed Hurricane Sandy to hit to save me from having
Mm,
to speak up with a therapist.
yeah,
A
'cause it
lot
can be
has changed.
scary. Yeah.
Isn't that? Because if
Yeah.
I didn't, I may have continued to see her for a long time. And probably where I would have ended up when I had seen her, she told me at that time in the last session I ever had with her, what she told me was, listen, either you move out of your community or you need to go on some anti-anxiety medication. She
Oh,
says, because
that's
your
an
community is
interesting
making, yeah,
ultimatum. Okay.
she says, your community is making you ill, and I can't fix that. So if you're
Mm,
not willing to move out, you need to take medication. If I had continued staying with her, with my zero level of confidence, I may have ended up on medication that I didn't need, only because the facilitator that I was seeing didn't have the bandwidth to see more, right? Because she didn't respect my values. And I didn't have the confidence to speak up. And a lot has changed in that time. And what really has changed was this particular piece. For a long time, I hated therapy. For a long time, I was like, all therapists are bad. All coaches are terrible. I railed against the system. I was also a child. I needed to rail against the system. But in that time, what I learned was the responsibility is on me to get to know me, to build my confidence from the inside, to be willing to speak up. And I'm not perfect, right? I'm still a people pleaser. I still have my stuff. But it was a lot of this, again, this da es atzmacha, this course that I mentioned. I was joking about it before, but it's actually not a joke. I do teach a course on self-development that isn't a course on therapy. There are therapeutic principles intertwined. But the goal of this course was that when I designed it, I kept thinking about what were the things that I needed back then, 12 years ago, when I was seeing a therapist that did not meet my standards and that we weren't a match for one another. And I was too scared to break up with her. And she was giving me really faulty advice. And I was caught in a bind that, thank God, a hurricane saved me from. What information would have saved me then? What was the information? What were the tools? What were the inner resources that I needed? And I sat down and really thought about this for a long time. And I came up with a course outline. That's one of the courses that I teach. It's called Vessel, because the goal of the course is to teach a client how to be a vessel for themselves, how to be a safe container for themselves. Vessel
Wow.
is not therapy. It's a precursor to therapy.
Yeah.
It's if you want to be successful in therapy, there has to be a me that's actually coming into therapy. You got to build your me. And there are so many different ways to build your me. You can build your me by, you're big on nutrition. If you're not careful about what you put into your body, like if you what you feed yourself becomes yourself.
You
So
are what you
that's
eat. Yeah.
you are what you eat. And if so, nutrition builds you, exercise builds you, what you read, what you watch, right? The
Yeah.
media, the information that you take in builds you.
Who
All
you
of
surround yourself
learning,
with. Yeah.
exactly. Your friends build you. So I created a course that I hoped would build people. But there are so many different ways to build yourself. There's no one right way. But the goal would be not heal yourself, not fix yourself, build yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only through building yourself that you can get to that place that can get you past the crisis point, that can get you out of pain, get you out of trauma. But it starts with first building yourself.
Yeah, because you can hear all the things. You can listen to this conversation, but if you can't take action unless, like you're saying, like you're empowering yourself, you're building yourself, you're discovering yourself. You need to do you, and then everything else, it's going to lead you to the right places. You're going to be able to have the confidence to speak up, to take aligned actions with you're going to find out what your values are, right? Because we were saying before, some people don't even know what their values are. So
Right?
yeah, this conversation again can go like for many days
Yeah.
and multiple
My
days.
brain is like, where have we not touched yet?
Oh my God, so many places, right? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, the intention of this conversation was to bring awareness to women that they or men, whoever's listening, that you can and you should speak up for yourself. There are multiple different kinds of coaches and healers. Again, it doesn't matter if they have the certificates or the fancy letters after the name or not. It's really finding someone that aligns with your values, that can allow you to be you, that you don't feel judged, that you don't feel, again, there's a difference between the good, like it might not feel so good, but like the violation of that being discomfort versus being uncomfortable. So find your values, find someone that aligns with them, ask the questions, and empower yourself. Like do the thing. Like don't just listen and read. Like actually integrate and work on yourself so you can feel empowered to speak up. And also, like you could think, what's the worst that will happen if I speak up? Again, it is very scary to be in that situation, especially with the therapist, if they make it feel like it's a you problem. But what's the worst that can happen? So you might lose a couple $100. This person might hate you. You're ready. Don't feel good in this situation. So just do yourself a favor and walk out. Again, Fally has this amazing course, Vessel. Is there anything else that you would like to? First of all, how can people contact you if they want to get in touch with you, your courses, your workshops? How can someone find you? And do you have anything exciting you'd like to share in regards to your offers right now?
Oh wow. You can't contact me.
Ah,
I'm just like this
stay tuned
introvert
for
who's
another
like,
live.
right, like I'm just an introvert. I don't want to talk to people, but I do have a website. I do have a
Okay.
website. It's my name. So if you look at the bottom of the screen and you see the way my name is spelled, follyklein.com, it's fairly simple. My
Yes.
website tells you nothing about me. It's just a pretty picture. And
Very
you're going to
cool
read this
website.
website and think like, what does she actually do? I don't know what I do. I just show up where I'm needed. But yes, I do teach a couple of courses. I have this vessel course that we mentioned is actually the one I teach every year between Sukkot and Hanukkah. So it's
Oh,
8 weeks as
cool.
we get into winter time.
Okay.
It's the perfect 8 weeks in
That's good
between.
timing.
It's great timing. It's like
Yes.
it's winter, the nights are longer, your kids are off to school, there's no chagim, there's nothing
Yeah.
happening. Great time to get to know yourself. So
Mm.
it's going to be our 6th year running this
Wow.
cohort. So that's
Wow.
coming up
Cool.
soon. And the best part about my cohorts is that once you're in, you join again free of charge every year.
Cool.
So you're in for life. It only runs once a year, but you're in for life. And the reason I've done that, even though it makes me no money, is because I really believe in that. You've never really stopped knowing yourself.
Yeah.
So knowing yourself now and then who you're going to be in a year from now, you come back, we redo the lectures, we do the meditations and the journaling, and you're going to get to a whole new layer. And that's so exciting. So that's a
Love
course
that.
that I offer. Yeah, and I also offer later in the year, we offer an intimacy, not self-intimacy,
Ooh.
intimacy,
If it becomes
a
a thing, let me know.
right, yes,
I'm
if it
gonna take
becomes a
credit.
thing. That's the advanced course.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
that's a course on intimacy as it relates to an embodied woman. I think people think intimacy is about marriage and relationship, and there's an intimacy that you do have to have with yourself, a confidence in your body, knowing the beauty and wonder and also the tradition around your body, whether it's from a scientific perspective, a religious perspective. Who you are as a woman and really embodying that is so important. So we do that in the wintertime. And then I give some teacher trainings, not teacher trainings, facilitator trainings. We have a hypnosis
Love
training
that.
coming, hypnotherapy in the winter, and breathwork training starts again in the summertime. So
Wow.
I've been keeping myself busy,
Yeah, yeah,
in good
definitely
ways.
sounds like it. I love it. I love it. This is so
Yeah.
aligned. Again, I just trust the process of like these organic conversations happening because they're so good and juicy. And like we're like on the same page with like empowerment, embodiment. Like my coaching is called Empower Her because I am so passionate about empowering women to discover their voice and their true core and their essence and giving them the confidence to help them make, take actions that align with their life where they're ready to level up. They're ready to go and they just need guidance getting there. So I love all that. And again,
You
what's
know
the
what I want to
embodiment piece?
say?
Yeah,
One
please.
thing, therapy should never change you. When you sing level up, therapy should make you more of who you already are. It shouldn't change you. It should grow you. So when I hear you say that when the work that you do is helping women level up, that is what you're looking for.
Mm, okay, I'll take that.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for throwing that in there. Ooh.
So that's my endorsement for you.
Thank you. Okay, this is all worth it. And again, this is because I struggle with these things and I've been creating, and I'm also constantly creating and recreating and remastering everything that I'm learning and that I am embodying and integrating because I'm truly passionate about helping women get to wherever it is that they need to go, which is different for everyone. I actually do one-on-one Empower Her coaching. I have something actually coming up calling Desired Living. It's your deservedness. So it's a 6-month program. It's for women who already they have this awareness, they've done the healing work, and they just know that there's something in between them and claiming their dreams and desires, usually due to a recent or past trauma. So we work on releasing the limiting beliefs that are holding them back, and they're ready to shed and step into their newest them, literally level up. So that's a group coaching that I have upcoming. And yeah, a bunch of good stuff. You can find me on my website, sportruth.com. It's actually very much still nutrition based, which I am kind of veering away from, as we evolve and grow. But yeah, so you can find us both by our names. Very simple. Thank you all so much for being here. We're not going to open the Q&A because it's already 2:30. But if you like this conversation and you want to see us again, let us know. Message us, hit us up, and let us know what topic you'll be interested in. And thank you so much, Folly. Your
Thank
insights and
you.
wisdom are profound. I so appreciate you and coming here and sharing the space with everyone. Wishing you so much success on your upcoming vessel experience. And
Thank
we
you.
will be in touch. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Folly.